Something strange is happening all over the world. People are talking about an ancient book that was hidden for thousands of years. They are making videos about it. They are doing challenges. They are asking questions that nobody thought to ask before. The book is called the Book of Enoch, and right now, everyone wants to know what it says. Chapter 1. The challenge that changed everything. It started like most things do these days. Someone posted a video on social media. The video was simple. A young woman sat in her room with an old book in her hands. She looked at the camera and said something that would change how millions of people think about ancient history. "I just read something that blew my mind," she said. "This book talks about giants walking the earth. It talks about angels who came down from heaven and taught humans secrets they were not supposed to know. It talks about a man who walked with God and saw things that no human was supposed to see. And here's the crazy part. This book was part of the Bible for hundreds of years, and then someone decided to take it out." She held up the book. "This is the Book of Enoch. I challenge you to read it and tell me what you think. Use the hashtag Book of Enoch Challenge and share what you learned. But I'm warning you, once you read this, you will never see the world the same way again." That video got shared thousands of times in the first day. Then something amazing happened. People started taking the challenge. They bought copies of the Book of Enoch. They read it. They made their own videos. They shared quotes. They asked questions. They started talking about things that most people had never heard of before. Within weeks, the Book of Enoch challenge was everywhere. People were posting videos with titles like, "I can't believe this was hidden from us," and "The book they don't want you to read," and "Why aren't we learning about this in school?" The challenge spread to every platform. Young people, old people, religious people, and people who had never read the Bible were all talking about the same thing. But what made this challenge different from other viral trends was what happened next. People didn't just read the book and move on. They started asking deeper questions. They wanted to know why this book was removed from the Bible. They wanted to know if the stories were real. They wanted to know what other books might be hidden from them. The challenge had opened a door that many people didn't even know existed. Churches started getting phone calls. Pastors found themselves answering questions they hadn't been asked in years. Libraries reported that copies of the Book of Enoch were flying off the shelves faster than they could order them. Bookstores couldn't keep up with the demand. People were downloading digital copies and sharing them with friends and family. The challenge wasn't just about reading a book. It became about seeking truth. It became about questioning what we've been told. It became about wondering if there are other secrets hidden in plain sight. And at the center of it all was an ancient book written by a man who claimed to have walked with God himself. Social media experts tried to figure out why this particular challenge caught fire when so many others fizzled out. The answer seemed to be in the content itself. The Book of Enoch doesn't just tell boring history. It tells stories that sound like science fiction, but claim to be fact. It talks about advanced beings from the sky. It describes technology that sounds impossibly modern for an ancient text. It gives details about the structure of heaven and earth that make people wonder how someone thousands of years ago could have known such things. The challenge also appealed to people's sense of mystery and conspiracy. In a world where people are always looking for hidden truths and secret knowledge, the Book of Enoch seemed to offer exactly that. Here was a book that had been part of religious tradition for centuries, then suddenly removed. Here were stories that had been deemed too dangerous or too strange for regular people to read. The forbidden nature of the content made it even more appealing. As the challenge grew, different groups of people started interpreting the book in different ways. Some saw it as religious truth that had been suppressed. Others saw it as ancient mythology that contained hidden wisdom. Still others read it as possible evidence of ancient alien contact or advanced civilizations that had been forgotten by history. The book seemed to offer something for everyone while satisfying no one completely. The viral nature of the challenge also meant that people were reading the book together, even when they were apart. Comment sections became places where people shared their thoughts and theories. Discussion groups formed around specific chapters or stories. People started meeting in coffee shops and community centers to talk about what they had read. The challenge had created a global book club focused on one of the most mysterious texts ever written. But to really understand why the Book of Enoch challenge became such a phenomenon, you have to understand what the book actually says. You have to know the story of Enoch himself and the incredible journey that led to this ancient text being written in the first place. Chapter 2. Who was Enoch? Long before the challenge went viral, long before social media existed, long before books were even printed, there lived a man named Enoch. His story begins in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, but it's told in just a few short sentences that leave more questions than answers. The Bible tells us that Enoch was the great-great-great-great-grandson of Adam, the first man. His family tree goes like this. Adam had a son named Seth. Seth had a son named Enos. Enos had a son named Canaan. Canaan had a son named Mahalaleel. Mahalaleel had a son named Jared. And Jared had a son named Enoch. This makes Enoch part of the seventh generation from Adam. In biblical times, the number 7 was very important. It represented completeness and perfection. So being the 7th generation was significant. It marked Enoch as someone special before he even did anything remarkable. The Bible tells us that Enoch lived for 365 years. That might sound like a really long time to us, but in those days, people lived much longer. Adam lived for 930 years. Seth lived for 912 years. Enoch's father, Jared, lived for 962 years. So actually, Enoch died young compared to his family members. But the reason he died young is what makes his story so interesting. Genesis chapter 5, verse 24, says something very strange about Enoch. It says, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." This is a very different way of talking about someone's death. For everyone else, the Bible says they died. But for Enoch, it says he was not, because God took him. What does it mean that Enoch walked with God? The Hebrew word used here suggests a very close, personal relationship. It's the same word used to describe a casual stroll or a journey taken together. It means that Enoch didn't just pray to God or worship God from a distance. He actually spent time with God, like friends spending time together. The phrase "he was not" is also very unusual. In Hebrew, it means he was no longer found in his usual place. He wasn't where people expected him to be. He had disappeared. But this wasn't a mysterious disappearance, like a missing person case. The text makes it clear that God took him. God removed him from the earth while he was still alive. This makes Enoch one of only 2 people in the entire Bible who never died a normal death. The other person is Elijah, who was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. But while Elijah's story gets several chapters in the Bible, Enoch's story gets just a few verses. This has always made people wonder, what was so special about Enoch that God took him directly to heaven without dying? The New Testament gives us a few more clues about Enoch. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 5, it says, "By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God." The word "translated" here means he was moved from one place to another, specifically from earth to heaven. This verse tells us that Enoch had faith and that he pleased God. But it also tells us that God made sure Enoch would never experience death. Death was not part of God's plan for Enoch. Instead, God had something else in mind for him. The book of Jude, which is near the end of the New Testament, gives us even more information about Enoch. Jude quotes something that Enoch said, "And Enoch also, the 7th from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." This quote is very important because it shows that Enoch was a prophet. He received messages from God about the future. He knew things that were going to happen long before they actually happened. And the specific prophecy that Jude quotes is about God coming to judge the world, bringing thousands of holy beings with him. But here's the interesting thing about that quote from Jude. When scholars look for it in the Bible, they can't find it anywhere except in Jude. Jude is quoting something that Enoch said, but that quote doesn't appear in Genesis or anywhere else in the Standard Bible. So where did Jude get this quote from? The answer is that Jude was quoting from the Book of Enoch. This means that at least some of the writers of the New Testament knew about the Book of Enoch and considered it to be a legitimate source of information about what Enoch actually said and did. If Jude felt comfortable quoting from the Book of Enoch in his letter that became part of the Bible, then the Book of Enoch must have been well known and respected in the early Christian community. This raises big questions about why the Book of Enoch is not in our Bibles today. If the biblical writers knew about it and quoted from it, why did later church leaders decide to remove it? What did they find in the Book of Enoch that made them uncomfortable? What stories did they think were too strange or too dangerous for regular people to read? To answer those questions, we have to look at what the Book of Enoch actually says. And when we do, we discover stories that are unlike anything else in religious literature. We find accounts of Enoch's journey to heaven, his conversations with angels, and his witness to events that shaped the early history of the world in ways that most people have never heard about. Chapter 3: The Book That Was Hidden. For over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch was lost to the Western world. People knew it existed because of references to it in other ancient writings, but no one could find a complete copy. It was like a legendary treasure that everyone had heard about, but no one could locate. The book had been popular in the early centuries after Christ. Many church leaders read it and quoted from it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church considered it to be part of the Bible and still does today. But gradually, in the Western churches, the book fell out of favor. Church councils decided it should not be included in the official Bible. Copies became rare, and eventually, the book seemed to disappear completely. This disappearance wasn't an accident. Church leaders had specific reasons for wanting the Book of Enoch to be forgotten. The stories it contained were controversial. They raised questions that the church leadership found difficult to answer. They presented a view of early human history that didn't fit with the simpler narratives that the church preferred to teach. One of the main problems church leaders had with the Book of Enoch was its detailed descriptions of angels. The book didn't just mention angels in passing. It named specific angels, described their appearances, explained their different roles and responsibilities, and told stories about some angels who had rebelled against God. This level of detail about the spiritual world made some church leaders nervous. Another issue was the book's emphasis on secret knowledge. The Book of Enoch claimed that certain angels had taught humans things they weren't supposed to know. This included information about astronomy, meteorology, the signs of the earth, mathematics, writing, and various technologies. The idea that knowledge could be forbidden or dangerous was troubling to church leaders who wanted to encourage learning and education. The book also contained prophecies about the end times that were very specific and sometimes frightening. It described judgments and punishments that would come upon the earth. It talked about the fate of different groups of people in ways that could be interpreted as excluding some people from salvation. Church leaders worried that these prophecies might cause fear or despair among believers. Perhaps most controversially, the Book of Enoch told the story of the Nephilim, the giants mentioned briefly in Genesis, in much greater detail. It explained where these giants came from, what they did, and why God decided to destroy them in the flood. These stories were dramatic and sometimes violent, and they painted a picture of early human history that was much more complex and troubling than the simple creation account that most people learned. So gradually, the Book of Enoch was removed from circulation. Copies were not reproduced. New generations of Christians grew up without ever hearing the stories it contained. The book became a forbidden text, known only to scholars who studied ancient religious writings. But the book didn't disappear completely. In Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church continued to preserve it as part of their biblical canon. Ethiopian Christians read the Book of Enoch alongside Genesis, Exodus, and all the other books that Western Christians consider to be the Bible. To them, the stories of Enoch's heavenly journey and the fallen angels were just as much a part of religious truth as the stories of Moses or David. In 1773, everything changed. A Scottish explorer named James Bruce was traveling in Ethiopia when he discovered that the Ethiopian church still had complete copies of the Book of Enoch. He managed to obtain 3 copies and brought them back to Europe. For the first time in over 1,000 years, Western scholars could read the complete Book of Enoch. The discovery caused a sensation in academic circles. Here was a book that had been lost for centuries, suddenly available again. Scholars rushed to translate it and study it. They found that it contained stories and ideas that shed new light on Jewish and Christian history. They also found that many of the ideas in the Book of Enoch had influenced other religious writings, even though the source had been forgotten. As translations of the Book of Enoch became available, people began to understand why it had been controversial. The stories it told were indeed strange and sometimes troubling, but they were also fascinating and thought-provoking. The book raised questions about the nature of good and evil, the relationship between heaven and earth, and the hidden history of the human race. In the 20th century, even more copies of the Book of Enoch were discovered. Fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving that the book was known and copied by Jewish communities around the time of Christ. Versions in different languages turned up in various ancient libraries and archaeological sites. Each new discovery added to our understanding of how widespread and influential the book had been in ancient times. Today, the Book of Enoch is easily available to anyone who wants to read it. You can buy it in bookstores, download it online, or find it in most libraries. But for many people, it remains a hidden book because they've never heard of it. Most Christians and Jews grow up learning about the Bible without ever being told that there were other books, like Enoch, that were once considered equally important. This is part of what makes the Book of Enoch challenge so powerful. It's introducing people to a text that has been hiding in plain sight. The book isn't really secret or forbidden anymore, but it might as well be, because so few people know about it. The challenge is bringing this ancient text back into public awareness and letting people decide for themselves what to think about the stories it contains. When people discover that there's an entire book of the Bible that they've never heard of, it naturally makes them wonder what else they might not know. It makes them question why some books were included in the Bible while others were left out. It makes them curious about who made those decisions and what criteria they used. These are exactly the kinds of questions that the Book of Enoch Challenge is encouraging people to ask. Chapter 4. The Watchers, Angels Who Fell from Grace. One of the most shocking parts of the Book of Enoch is its detailed account of the Watchers. These were a special group of angels who were supposed to watch over humanity and report back to God about what people were doing. But according to Enoch, some of these watchers made a terrible decision that changed the course of human history forever. The Book of Enoch explains that there were 200 watchers who were assigned to watch over the earth. They lived in heaven, but could see everything that happened among humans. Their job was to observe and report, not to interfere. But as they watched, they began to develop feelings that angels weren't supposed to have. The leader of these rebellious angels was named Semjaza, though different versions of the book spell his name differently. Other important leaders included Azazel, Amaros, Barakijal, Kokabel, Ezekiel, Asbiel, Gadriel, and Penamuel. The Book of Enoch gives us their names and tells us what each of them specialized in when they began teaching forbidden knowledge to humans. What made these angels rebel was their attraction to human women. The Book of Enoch says that the Watchers saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they desired them. This was a completely inappropriate feeling for angels to have. Angels were supposed to be spiritual beings who didn't experience physical attraction or desire for earthly pleasures. But the Watchers couldn't ignore these feelings. They began to plot together. Semjaza was worried about taking such a drastic step by himself, so he convinced the others to join him. He said, "I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." So all 200 of them swore an oath together that they would all participate in this rebellion, and none of them would back out. The Book of Enoch tells us exactly where this happened. It says the Watchers came down to earth on Mount Hermon, which is a real mountain on the border between Lebanon and Syria. The name Hermon actually means devoted to destruction in Hebrew, which seems fitting for the place where this cosmic rebellion began. Once they were on earth, the Watchers took human wives and had children with them. But because the fathers were angels and the mothers were human, their children were not normal humans. They were giants, much taller and stronger than regular people. The Book of Enoch says these giants were 300 cubits tall, which would be about 450 feet. Even if this number is symbolic rather than literal, it indicates that these beings were enormous compared to normal humans. These giant children of the Watchers were called Nephilim, which means fallen ones in Hebrew. The Bible mentions them briefly in Genesis chapter 6, where it says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." But the Book of Enoch gives us much more detail about what these Nephilim were like and what they did. It says they became violent and corrupted the earth. They ate everything in sight, consuming all the food that humans had grown and stored. When they ran out of regular food, they began eating animals. And when they ran out of animals, they began eating each other and even eating humans. The Nephilim also became skilled in warfare and violence. They taught humans how to make weapons and how to fight wars. Before the Watchers came down, humans had lived relatively peaceful lives. But the presence of the Nephilim introduced a level of violence and conflict that the world had never seen before. Meanwhile, the Watchers themselves were teaching humans all sorts of knowledge that God had not intended for them to learn. Azazel taught men how to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He also taught women how to use cosmetics, jewelry, and eye makeup. Semjaza taught humans about enchantments and root cuttings, which were forms of magic and sorcery. Amaros taught humans how to break spells. Barakijal taught them astrology and how to read the signs in the stars. Kokabel taught them about constellations and astronomy. Ezekiel taught them about clouds and weather patterns. Asbel taught them about the signs of the earth, possibly including agriculture or geology. Gadriel taught them about weapons of war and how to strike fatal blows. Penemuel taught humans how to write with ink and paper. At first glance, some of these might seem like good things to teach. Writing, astronomy, and meteorology are all useful forms of knowledge, but the Book of Enoch presents them as forbidden knowledge that humans weren't ready to handle. The implication is that God had a plan for gradually revealing these things to humanity at the right time and in the right way, but the Watchers disrupted that plan by teaching everything at once. The results of this forbidden teaching were disastrous. Humans began using their new knowledge for evil purposes. They used their writing skills to record spells and curses. They used their knowledge of astronomy to practice fortune-telling and divination. They used their metallurgy skills to make weapons for war rather than tools for farming. Instead of using their knowledge to serve God and help others, they used it to gain power and hurt their enemies. The Book of Enoch says that the situation on earth became so bad that the remaining righteous people cried out to heaven for help. Their prayers reached God, along with the prayers of the souls of people who had been killed by the Nephilim. God heard these cries and decided that something had to be done to stop the corruption that the Watchers had introduced to the world. So God sent 4 archangels to deal with the situation. He sent Uriel to warn Noah about the coming flood. He sent Raphael to bind Azazel and throw him into a pit of sharp rocks in the desert, where he would remain until the final judgment. He sent Gabriel to destroy the Nephilim by making them fight against each other until they were all dead. And he sent Michael to bind Semjaza and the other Watchers and imprison them under hills of the earth until the day of judgment. The flood that God sent in Noah's time was specifically designed to cleanse the earth of the corruption that the Watchers had introduced. It wasn't just about punishing human wickedness in general. It was about removing the genetic contamination of the Nephilim and washing away the effects of the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers had taught. This story from the Book of Enoch gives us a completely different perspective on the flood account in Genesis. Instead of just being about human sin in general, it becomes about a specific cosmic rebellion that had corrupted the natural order of creation. The flood wasn't just punishment, it was necessary surgery to remove a cancer that threatened to destroy everything God had made. For people encountering this story through the Book of Enoch challenge, it raises profound questions about the nature of knowledge, power, and moral responsibility. It suggests that not all knowledge is good to have, and that some technologies or capabilities might be too dangerous for humans to handle without proper spiritual preparation. These are themes that feel very relevant in our modern world of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and other powerful technologies that could be used for good or evil. Chapter 5. The Giants Among Us. The Nephilim Story. The story of the Nephilim is one of the most fascinating and disturbing parts of the Book of Enoch. These weren't just unusually tall people. According to Enoch's account, they were a completely different kind of being, part angel and part human, and their presence on earth created chaos that ultimately required divine intervention to stop. When the Watchers took human wives, their offspring inherited characteristics from both parents. From their angelic fathers, they received supernatural size, strength, and longevity. From their human mothers, they received physical bodies that needed food, shelter, and other material things. This combination created beings that were incredibly powerful, but also incredibly hungry and demanding. The Book of Enoch describes how the Nephilim grew rapidly and consumed enormous amounts of food. A normal human family could feed itself by farming a small plot of land and keeping a few animals. But each Nephilim required as much food as hundreds of normal humans. They quickly ate up all the food that their human neighbors had produced, leaving regular people to starve. When the available food ran out, the Nephilim didn't simply die of hunger like normal beings would. Instead, they began hunting and eating animals that humans had never eaten before. They ate wild beasts, birds, reptiles, and fish indiscriminately. They consumed entire forests full of wildlife and left ecosystems barren and empty. But even eating all the animals wasn't enough to satisfy their hunger. The Book of Enoch tells us that the Nephilim then began to eat each other. These giant beings became cannibals, hunting and killing their own kind for food. The violence that resulted from this cannibalism was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Most horrifying of all, the Nephilim eventually began eating humans. Regular people became prey for these giants. Families lived in terror, knowing that at any moment a Nephilim might appear and devour them. The book describes this time as a period when the earth was filled with violence and bloodshed, unlike anything before or since. The Nephilim weren't just physically dangerous, they were also spiritually corrupting. Because they were part angel, they had access to supernatural knowledge and abilities. They could do things that normal humans couldn't do, and they used these abilities to establish themselves as rulers and gods over human communities. Some of the Nephilim became the mighty warriors and kings mentioned in ancient legends and mythologies. The Book of Enoch suggests that many of the heroes and demigods that different cultures remember in their oldest stories were actually Nephilim or their descendants. This would explain why cultures all around the world have similar stories about giants, heroes with supernatural abilities, and conflicts between these powerful beings and regular humans. The Nephilim also passed on some of the forbidden knowledge that their fathers had learned. They taught humans advanced techniques of warfare, including the use of weapons and battle strategies that made conflicts much more deadly than they had been before. They introduced concepts of conquest and domination that changed human society from peaceful cooperation to violent competition. Some Nephilim became skilled in the magical arts that their Watcher fathers had taught. They could perform supernatural feats that amazed and terrified normal humans. They used these abilities to convince people that they were gods who deserved worship and obedience. This was the beginning of idolatry and false religion, as humans began worshipping created beings instead of the Creator. The genetic legacy of the Nephilim was also problematic. The Book of Enoch suggests that the mixing of angelic and human genetics created a corruption that spread through the human population. This wasn't just about having giant children. It was about introducing spiritual and moral corruption into the human gene pool that affected people's ability to discern right from wrong. As the Nephilim multiplied and spread across the earth, they established kingdoms and civilizations that were based on violence, oppression, and false worship. These civilizations became very advanced in some ways, developing technologies and knowledge that wouldn't normally have been available to humans at that stage of history. But they used their advancement for evil purposes rather than good ones. The Book of Enoch explains that this is why God decided to send the flood. It wasn't just about punishing human wickedness in general. It was specifically about cleansing the earth of the genetic and spiritual corruption that the Nephilim had introduced. The flood was necessary to give humanity a fresh start without the contaminating influence of these hybrid beings. According to Enoch, most of the Nephilim died in the flood because they were physical beings despite their supernatural parentage. However, their spirits didn't die the way human spirits do. Instead, they became evil spirits, or demons, that continue to influence the world even today. This explains where demons come from and why they seem to have knowledge about spiritual matters that normal human spirits wouldn't possess. The Book of Enoch also suggests that some Nephilim genetics survived the flood, which explains why the Bible mentions giants existing after the flood as well as before it. The text indicates that Noah's family was genetically pure, but some of the people in the post-flood world somehow carried traces of Nephilim heritage that occasionally manifested in their descendants. This part of the Nephilim story has led to much speculation about whether such beings might exist today. Some people who read the Book of Enoch become convinced that modern accounts of unusually tall skeletons, unexplained archaeological discoveries, or even UFO sightings might be evidence that the Nephilim or their descendants are still present in the world. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the Nephilim story raises important questions about what happens when power is combined with moral corruption. The Nephilim had abilities that far exceeded those of normal humans, but they used those abilities for selfish and destructive purposes. Their story serves as a warning about what can happen when great power exists without corresponding wisdom and righteousness. For people participating in the Book of Enoch challenge, the Nephilim story often becomes a focal point for discussion and debate. Some see it as literal history that explains mysteries about ancient civilizations and archaeological anomalies. Others interpret it as mythology that contains important truths about human nature and the dangers of unchecked power. But almost everyone who reads it agrees that it's a story unlike anything they've encountered in traditional religious teaching. Chapter 6: Enoch's incredible journey to heaven. While the stories of the Watchers and Nephilim are dramatic and troubling, The most amazing part of the Book of Enoch is the account of Enoch's own journey to heaven. This isn't just a story about someone dying and going to the afterlife. According to the text, Enoch was taken to heaven while he was still alive, and he was given a guided tour of the spiritual realm that no other human had ever seen. The journey begins when Enoch is visited by angels who tell him that God wants to see him. Enoch is naturally frightened by this prospect. He knows that no human can see God and live, and he's not sure what God wants with him. But the angels assure him that he has found favor with God and that he will be protected during his journey. The Book of Enoch describes how Enoch is lifted up from the earth and carried through the sky at incredible speed. He travels through layers of heaven that he never knew existed, each one more magnificent than the last. The angels who are guiding him explain what he's seeing and help him understand the wonders that surround him. In the first heaven, Enoch sees the storehouses of snow, hail, and frost. He learns that these weather phenomena are not random natural events, but are controlled by angels who release them according to God's commands. He sees the paths that winds follow and the chambers where different types of weather are kept until they are needed on earth. In the second heaven, Enoch encounters the imprisoned Watchers. These are the angels who rebelled and came down to earth to take human wives. They beg Enoch to intercede for them with God and ask for mercy. They want Enoch to write a petition asking God to forgive them and restore them to their former positions. Enoch agrees to write the petition, but when he presents it to God, he learns that there can be no forgiveness for what the Watchers have done. As Enoch continues his journey, he sees the foundations of the earth and learns how God structured the physical world. He sees the pillars that hold up the sky and the corners where the winds are stored. He learns about the cycles of the sun and moon and how they determine seasons, days, and years on earth. This information is presented as secret knowledge that only the highest angels normally possess. One of the most detailed parts of Enoch's journey involves his visit to the ends of the earth. He travels to the far north, south, east, and west, and sees wonders that exist beyond the normal human world. In the east, he sees the gates where the sun rises each morning. In the west, he sees where the sun sets each evening. In the north and south, he sees regions of ice and fire that balance the temperatures of the earth. Enoch also visits the place where the spirits of the dead are kept while waiting for the final judgment. He learns that there are different compartments for different types of souls. The righteous dead are kept in a place of comfort and light, while the wicked dead are kept in a place of darkness and torment. There are also separate areas for those who died violently and for those whose deaths were particularly unjust. The most awesome part of Enoch's journey comes when he is brought into the presence of God himself. The Book of Enoch describes God's throne as being made of crystal and surrounded by rivers of living fire. God appears as a figure of such brightness and glory that Enoch can barely look at him, even though he's been specially prepared for this encounter. When God speaks to Enoch, his voice is like the sound of many waters, or like thunder that shakes the foundations of heaven. God tells Enoch that he has been chosen to serve as a messenger between heaven and earth. He will be given knowledge about the past, present, and future, so that he can warn humanity about what is coming and encourage them to live righteously. God shows Enoch a vision of all human history from the beginning to the end. Enoch sees the creation of the world, the fall of Adam and Eve, the corruption caused by the Watchers, the flood, and everything that will happen afterward. He sees the rise and fall of nations, the coming of the Messiah, and the final judgment when all evil will be destroyed and righteousness will reign forever. During his time in heaven, Enoch is also taught by the archangels Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Each of them has different areas of expertise, and they share their knowledge with Enoch so that he can bring important information back to earth. Michael teaches him about warfare and justice. Gabriel teaches him about mercy and communication. Raphael teaches him about healing and restoration. Uriel teaches him about prophecy and the future. The Book of Enoch describes how Enoch is transformed during his heavenly journey. He's given a new body that can withstand the conditions of heaven and allow him to travel between the spiritual and physical realms. He's also given enhanced mental abilities so that he can understand and remember the vast amounts of information he's receiving. One of the most important things Enoch learns during his journey is about the calendar and the proper way to calculate time. The angels teach him that the year should have 364 days, divided into 4 seasons of 91 days each. This solar calendar is different from the lunar calendar that many cultures use, and Enoch is told that following the correct calendar is important for keeping the proper festivals and maintaining harmony with God's creation. Enoch also learns about the spiritual forces that influence events on earth. He discovers that there are angels assigned to every aspect of creation, from the movement of stars and planets to the growth of plants and the behavior of animals. Nothing happens by chance. Everything is part of a complex system that serves God's purposes, even when humans can't understand how or why. The Book of Enoch describes how Enoch is given books containing all this knowledge and told to share them with his descendants. These books become the source of wisdom for righteous people throughout history. They contain information about science, agriculture, medicine, and other practical subjects, but they also contain spiritual insights about how to live in harmony with God's will. When Enoch's heavenly journey is complete, he returns to earth for a brief time to share what he has learned with his family and community. He teaches them about the true structure of the universe, the proper way to worship God, and the importance of living righteously in preparation for the coming judgment. He also writes down everything he has seen and learned so that future generations will have access to this knowledge. Finally, after completing his earthly mission, Enoch is taken back to heaven permanently. The Book of Enoch suggests that he continues to serve as an advocate for humanity, interceding with God on behalf of the righteous and helping to prepare for the time when God's kingdom will be established on earth as it is in heaven. For people reading about Enoch's journey through the Book of Enoch challenge, this story often becomes deeply inspiring. It presents a vision of the universe as a place where spiritual and physical realities are intimately connected, where human actions have cosmic significance, and where faithful individuals can have a direct relationship with the divine. Whether taken as literal fact or symbolic truth, Enoch's journey offers hope that there is more to existence than what we can see and touch in our daily lives. Chapter 7: Secret Knowledge and Forbidden Wisdom. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Book of Enoch is its emphasis on secret knowledge and hidden wisdom. The text presents itself as containing information that was specially revealed to Enoch and is not available anywhere else. This forbidden knowledge covers everything from the structure of the universe to the future of humanity, and it raises important questions about what humans are supposed to know and when they're supposed to know it. According to the Book of Enoch, there are different levels of knowledge in the universe. Some information is meant for all humans to know and use. This includes basic skills like farming, cooking, building shelter, and caring for families. Other information is meant only for specially chosen individuals who can be trusted to use it wisely. And some information is meant to remain secret until the proper time when humanity is ready to handle it responsibly. The trouble began when the Watchers decided to share the highest levels of knowledge with humans who weren't prepared for it. They taught secrets that were supposed to remain in heaven until God decided to reveal them gradually through proper channels. By jumping ahead of God's timeline, the Watchers caused tremendous problems that affected all of human history. The knowledge that Azazel taught about metallurgy and weapon making is a good example of this principle. Learning how to work with metals could have been a wonderful gift that helped humans build better tools, create beautiful art, and improve their quality of life. But when this knowledge was given at the wrong time and in the wrong way, it was immediately used to make weapons for war and violence. Similarly, the knowledge that Barakijal taught about astrology could have helped humans understand the movements of stars and planets for navigation, agriculture, and scientific advancement. But when it was given prematurely, it was used for fortune-telling, divination, and other practices that led people away from trusting in God's providence. The Book of Enoch suggests that even good knowledge can become dangerous if it's acquired in the wrong way or used for the wrong purposes. The problem wasn't necessarily with the knowledge itself, but with the timing, the teachers, and the motivations of the students who received it. This theme resonates strongly with people participating in the Book of Enoch challenge because it mirrors concerns that many people have about modern technology and scientific advancement. We live in an age when humans have developed incredible capabilities in areas like genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, nuclear energy, and space travel. But we often struggle with questions about whether we're wise enough to handle these capabilities responsibly. The Book of Enoch also presents Enoch himself as someone who received secret knowledge, but in the proper way and for the right purposes. Unlike the humans who learned forbidden secrets from the Watchers, Enoch was specially chosen by God and taken to heaven, where he could receive knowledge directly from divine sources. He was also given this knowledge not for his own benefit, but so that he could share appropriate parts of it with others and help them live better lives. The knowledge that Enoch received included information about the calendar and the proper way to calculate time. This might seem like a minor detail, but the Book of Enoch presents it as extremely important. According to the text, following the wrong calendar leads to celebrating festivals at the wrong times, which disrupts the harmony between heaven and earth and interferes with God's plans. Enoch was also given knowledge about the structure of the earth and the movements of celestial bodies. He learned about the paths of the sun and moon, the cycles of seasons, and the forces that control weather and climate. This information helped him understand that the physical world is not chaotic or random, but follows precise patterns that serve God's purposes. Perhaps most importantly, Enoch received prophetic knowledge about the future of humanity. He was shown visions of coming events, including times of judgment and times of blessing. This knowledge allowed him to warn people about dangers ahead and encourage them to prepare by living righteously and maintaining their relationship with God. The Book of Enoch makes it clear that this secret knowledge comes with great responsibility. Enoch is not supposed to keep the knowledge to himself or use it for personal gain. Instead, he's commanded to share it with his descendants and with all righteous people who will listen. But he's also warned to be careful about how he shares it, making sure that it reaches people who will use it properly. The text describes how Enoch wrote down everything he learned and gave these writings to his son, Methuselah, who was supposed to pass them on to future generations. These writings became a treasure trove of wisdom for people who wanted to understand God's ways and live according to divine principles. But the Book of Enoch also warns that not everyone will accept this knowledge or use it properly. Some people will reject it because it challenges their existing beliefs or threatens their positions of power. Others will try to misuse it for selfish purposes, just as the original recipients of the Watcher's teaching had done. This creates a tension that runs throughout the Book of Enoch. On one hand, the text presents itself as containing vitally important information that everyone needs to know. On the other hand, it acknowledges that this information is dangerous and can cause great harm if it falls into the wrong hands or is misunderstood by people who aren't spiritually prepared to receive it. For many people participating in the Book of Enoch challenge, this tension feels very relevant to contemporary issues. We live in an information age where vast amounts of knowledge are available to anyone with internet access. But we're also learning that information can be used to manipulate, deceive, and harm people in ways that were never possible before. The Book of Enoch's approach to secret knowledge raises questions about whether some information should be restricted or whether everyone has a right to know everything. It also raises questions about how we can distinguish between knowledge that comes from good sources and knowledge that comes from sources that don't have our best interests at heart. These themes help explain why the Book of Enoch challenge has resonated with so many people in our current cultural moment. The text speaks to concerns about hidden agendas, suppressed information, and the responsibility that comes with knowledge. It offers a framework for thinking about these issues that is both ancient and surprisingly modern. The challenge encourages people to seek knowledge and truth, but it also encourages them to be discerning about their sources and careful about how they use what they learn. This balanced approach appeals to people who want to be informed and empowered, but who also recognize that knowledge without wisdom can be dangerous. Chapter 8. Why churches removed this book. The question that many people ask when they first learn about the Book of Enoch is simple. If this book was once considered part of the Bible, why isn't it in our Bibles today? The answer to this question involves centuries of religious politics, theological debates, and decisions made by church leaders who had very specific reasons for wanting certain books to be forgotten. In the early centuries after Christ, there was no single, standardized Bible that all Christians used. Different communities had different collections of books that they considered to be scripture. Some communities included the Book of Enoch in their biblical collections, while others did not. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church included it and still considers it to be part of the Bible today. But in most other Christian communities, the book gradually fell out of favor. One of the main reasons for this change was that the Book of Enoch raised theological questions that church leaders found difficult to answer. The book's detailed descriptions of angels, its accounts of spiritual warfare, and its complex explanations of good and evil didn't fit neatly into the simpler theological frameworks that the church was trying to establish. Church leaders were particularly uncomfortable with the book's emphasis on the Watchers and their role in corrupting humanity. This story suggested that evil in the world wasn't just due to human choices, but was also due to the actions of rebellious spiritual beings. This made it harder to explain why God allowed evil to exist and why humans should be held responsible for sins that were influenced by supernatural forces beyond their control. The detailed genealogies and chronologies in the Book of Enoch also created problems for church leaders who were trying to establish official timelines for biblical history. The book's calendar system didn't match the calendar systems that most communities were using, and its dating of various events sometimes conflicted with dates given in other biblical books. Another major concern was the book's emphasis on secret knowledge and hidden wisdom. Church leaders wanted to establish themselves as the primary sources of religious authority and teaching. They were uncomfortable with texts that claimed to contain special revelations that weren't available through official church channels. The Book of Enoch suggested that important spiritual truths could be learned outside of the institutional church, which threatened the church's control over religious education. The book's detailed descriptions of heavenly realms and spiritual beings also worried church leaders who were concerned about the development of elaborate mythologies and superstitions. They preferred simpler, more straightforward presentations of spiritual truths that wouldn't encourage people to speculate about things beyond their understanding. Some church leaders were also concerned about the book's potential to cause fear and despair among believers. The stories of the Nephilim, the accounts of divine judgment, and the descriptions of punishment for the wicked were vivid and sometimes frightening. Church leaders worried that these stories might discourage people from faith rather than encouraging them toward righteous living. The process of removing the Book of Enoch from biblical collections wasn't sudden or dramatic. Instead, it happened gradually over several centuries. Church councils would meet to discuss which books should be considered authoritative scripture, and the Book of Enoch would be mentioned less and less frequently in their deliberations. Different church leaders had different reasons for questioning the book's authenticity and authority. Some argued that it couldn't have been written by the biblical Enoch because its style and content didn't match what they expected from such an ancient figure. Others argued that even if parts of it were authentic, other parts had been added or changed by later writers, making it unreliable as a source of divine revelation. The development of official church doctrine also played a role in the book's exclusion. As church leaders worked to establish clear, consistent teachings about important theological topics, they found that the Book of Enoch sometimes supported views that they had decided to reject. Rather than deal with the contradictions, they found it easier to simply not include the book in their official collections. Political considerations also influenced the decision to exclude the Book of Enoch. The book contained passages that could be interpreted as critical of earthly rulers and political systems. Church leaders who were trying to maintain good relationships with government authorities were nervous about promoting texts that might be seen as subversive or revolutionary. The rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire brought additional pressures to conform to mainstream cultural expectations. The Book of Enoch's stories of giants, fallen angels, and supernatural warfare sounded too much like pagan mythology to some church leaders who wanted to distinguish Christianity clearly from the religious traditions it was replacing. Over time, as fewer and fewer church leaders promoted the Book of Enoch, it became increasingly rare to find copies of the text. Without official church support, scribes were less likely to make new copies, and existing copies were less likely to be preserved carefully. The book gradually disappeared from circulation in most parts of the Christian world. By the medieval period, most Western Christians had never heard of the Book of Enoch. It existed only in scholarly references and in the collections of a few specialized libraries. The average believer learned about biblical history and spiritual truths without ever encountering the stories and teachings that the Book of Enoch contained. This historical process helps explain why the Book of Enoch challenge has been so powerful in our current time. For many people, discovering the Book of Enoch feels like uncovering a conspiracy or finding a hidden treasure. They wonder why they were never told about this book in Sunday school or Bible study. They question what other important information might have been kept from them. The fact that the book was deliberately excluded from most biblical collections makes it seem forbidden and mysterious, which naturally increases people's curiosity about its contents. When people read the book for themselves and find that its stories are fascinating and thought-provoking, they wonder why church leaders thought it was necessary to hide these stories from ordinary believers. Some people who participate in the Book of Enoch challenge become critical of organized religion and institutional churches, feeling that they have been deliberately kept ignorant of important spiritual truths. Others become more interested in exploring alternative sources of religious and spiritual wisdom, looking for teachings that haven't been filtered through official church channels. But the challenge also leads some people to a deeper appreciation for the complexity of religious history and the difficult decisions that church leaders had to make in establishing official doctrines and biblical collections. They come to understand that excluding the Book of Enoch wasn't necessarily about hiding truth, but about trying to create coherent, manageable systems of belief that could be taught effectively to large numbers of people. Regardless of how people interpret the historical exclusion of the Book of Enoch, the challenge has succeeded in bringing this ancient text back into public awareness and encouraging people to read it for themselves, rather than simply accepting what they've been told about it by others. Chapter 9. The challenge goes global. What started as one person's social media post about an ancient book quickly became a worldwide phenomenon that crossed cultural, religious, and generational boundaries. The Book of Enoch challenge spread faster than anyone could have predicted, reaching people in countries and communities that had never heard of the book before. The viral nature of the challenge was helped by several factors that made it perfect for social media sharing. First, the book itself is genuinely fascinating, with stories that sound like science fiction but claim to be historical fact. When people read about fallen angels, giants, and journeys to heaven, they naturally want to share these discoveries with their friends and followers. Second, the challenge tapped into a widespread feeling that important information is being hidden from the general public. In an era when people are increasingly skeptical of official narratives and institutional authorities, the idea that churches had deliberately suppressed an entire book of the Bible resonated with many people's existing suspicions about hidden truths and secret knowledge. Third, the challenge was easy to participate in, but offered the possibility of deep, meaningful engagement. Anyone could buy or download a copy of the Book of Enoch and start reading. But the text was complex enough to reward serious study and discussion. This combination of accessibility and depth made the challenge appealing to both casual social media users and serious truth seekers. As the challenge spread, different communities and cultures began interpreting the Book of Enoch through their own unique perspectives. In some African communities, people connected the book's stories to traditional oral histories about giants and supernatural beings that had been passed down through generations. They saw the Book of Enoch as confirmation of stories that their ancestors had always told, but that modern education had dismissed as primitive superstition. In Latin American communities, the book's themes of divine judgment and spiritual warfare resonated with people who were struggling with poverty, violence, and social injustice. They interpreted Enoch's prophecies about God's coming judgment as hope that current inequalities and suffering would eventually be corrected by divine intervention. In Asian communities, some people found connections between the Book of Enoch's descriptions of heavenly realms and traditional Buddhist or Hindu concepts of multiple levels of existence. They appreciated the book's detailed cosmology and its emphasis on the interconnectedness of spiritual and physical realities. In European and North American communities, the challenge often became connected to existing interests in conspiracy theories, alternative history, and ancient mysteries. People who were already interested in topics like UFOs, lost civilizations, or government cover-ups found in the Book of Enoch, a religious text that seemed to support their beliefs about hidden aspects of human history. The challenge also attracted people from different religious backgrounds, not just Christians. Some Jewish readers were interested in exploring a text that had been part of their ancient tradition, but wasn't included in modern Jewish biblical collections. Some Muslim readers found connections between the Book of Enoch's stories and similar accounts in Islamic tradition about angels and divine judgment. Even people who weren't particularly religious became interested in the challenge because of its historical and literary significance. They approached the Book of Enoch as an important ancient text that offered insights into how people thousands of years ago understood their world and their relationship to the divine. As the challenge grew, it began to influence other areas of culture beyond just social media posts. Podcasters started dedicating episodes to discussing the Book of Enoch and its implications. YouTube creators made videos analyzing specific chapters or comparing the book's accounts to other ancient texts. Book clubs started selecting the Book of Enoch as their monthly read, leading to lively discussions in libraries and community centers around the world. The challenge also sparked academic interest in the text. University professors who specialized in ancient literature, religious studies, or biblical scholarship found themselves fielding questions from students and community members who had learned about the Book of Enoch through social media. Some professors incorporated the book into their course curricula, using the viral challenge as a teachable moment about how ancient texts are preserved, transmitted, and interpreted. Publishers and booksellers were caught off guard by the sudden demand for copies of the Book of Enoch. Many bookstores had never stocked the book because there had been little previous interest in it. Suddenly, they couldn't keep it on the shelves. Online retailers reported massive increases in sales of both print and digital versions of the text. Publishers rushed to produce new editions with updated translations and scholarly introductions to meet the growing demand. The challenge also led to the creation of numerous online communities and discussion groups focused on studying the Book of Enoch. People who might never have met in person found themselves engaging in deep conversations about ancient angelology, prophetic literature, and the nature of good and evil. These virtual communities became spaces where people could explore questions and ideas that they might not feel comfortable discussing in their regular social circles. Some religious leaders initially viewed the challenge with suspicion or concern. They worried that people were getting interested in non-canonical texts without proper guidance or context. Some pastors and priests found themselves having to address questions about the Book of Enoch during sermons and Bible studies, even though they might not have studied the text extensively themselves. But other religious leaders embraced the challenge as an opportunity for education and dialogue. They organized special study groups focused on the Book of Enoch, using it as a starting point for discussions about biblical history, the development of scripture, and the relationship between canonical and non-canonical texts. Some seminaries added courses on ancient Jewish literature that included substantial coverage of the Book of Enoch and related texts. The global nature of the challenge also led to interesting cross-cultural exchanges. People from different countries and traditions began sharing their interpretations of the text and learning from each other's perspectives. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which had never stopped considering the Book of Enoch to be scripture, suddenly found themselves in the spotlight as guardians of an ancient tradition that the rest of the world was just rediscovering. As the challenge continued to spread, it began to influence popular culture in ways that went beyond just reading and discussing the book. Artists and musicians started creating works inspired by the Book of Enoch's imagery and themes. Writers began incorporating elements from the text into their novels and screenplays. Fashion designers created clothing lines inspired by the book's descriptions of heavenly beings and ancient warriors. The challenge also had unexpected educational benefits. Many people who participated in it became interested in learning more about ancient history, comparative religion, and textual criticism. They started reading other non-canonical texts and exploring the broader context of ancient Jewish and Christian literature. Libraries reported increased circulation of books on topics related to biblical studies and ancient Near Eastern cultures. For many participants, the Book of Enoch challenge became more than just a viral trend. It became a gateway to deeper spiritual exploration and intellectual growth. People who had never questioned their religious beliefs or their understanding of history found themselves embarking on journeys of discovery that changed their worldviews in fundamental ways. Chapter 10: What People Are Discovering. As millions of people around the world have taken up the Book of Enoch challenge, their responses and discoveries have been as diverse as the participants themselves. Some people find the book's stories incredible and life-changing, while others remain skeptical about its claims. But almost everyone who reads it agrees that it contains ideas and perspectives that they had never encountered before. One of the most common reactions is amazement at the book's detailed descriptions of things that seem impossibly advanced for an ancient text. People are struck by Enoch's accounts of traveling through space, his descriptions of the Earth from a cosmic perspective, and his knowledge of astronomical cycles and celestial mechanics. Some readers wonder how someone living thousands of years ago could have known about things that modern science has only recently discovered. Many people are also fascinated by the book's explanations for mysteries that have puzzled humanity for centuries. The text offers detailed accounts of where giants came from, why ancient civilizations seem to have possessed advanced knowledge, and how evil entered the world in ways that go beyond the simple creation account in Genesis. For people who have always wondered about these questions, the Book of Enoch provides answers, even if those answers raise new questions of their own. Religious believers who participate in the challenge often find themselves grappling with how the Book of Enoch relates to their existing faith traditions. Some see it as additional revelation that enhances and deepens their understanding of biblical truths. They appreciate having more detailed information about angels, heaven, and God's plans for humanity. They find that the book's emphasis on righteousness and divine judgment reinforces the moral teachings they've learned from canonical scripture. But other religious readers struggle with the book's implications for their faith. If the Book of Enoch contains true revelations from God, Why was it excluded from the Bible? If it contains important information about salvation and judgment, how can they be sure they've understood God's will correctly without having access to this information? Some people find their confidence in religious authorities shaken when they realize how much significant material has been kept from them. People with an interest in ancient history and archaeology often approach the Book of Enoch as a potential source of information about prehistoric civilizations and forgotten events. They look for connections between the book's accounts and archaeological discoveries of unusually large skeletal remains, advanced ancient technologies, and mysterious megalithic structures that seem to require construction techniques beyond what we would expect from ancient peoples. Some readers become convinced that the Book of Enoch provides the missing piece of the puzzle for understanding human prehistory. They see the accounts of the Watchers teaching advanced knowledge to humans as an explanation for how ancient civilizations developed sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and metallurgy seemingly overnight. They interpret archaeological anomalies as evidence that the Nephilim really existed and left traces of their presence that mainstream archaeology has been reluctant to acknowledge. Others approach the book from a more literary or mythological perspective. They appreciate the Book of Enoch as an important example of ancient apocalyptic literature that reveals how people in the centuries before Christ understood their world and their relationship to the divine. They see parallels between Enoch's stories and mythologies from other cultures, and they're interested in how these stories reflect universal human concerns about good and evil, justice and judgment, and the meaning of existence. People with interests in conspiracy theories and alternative history often find the Book of Enoch challenge particularly compelling. The book seems to support ideas about ancient secrets, hidden knowledge, and cover-ups by religious and political authorities. They see the book's exclusion from the Bible as evidence of a broader pattern of suppressing information that might challenge official narratives about human history and the nature of reality. For some participants, the challenge leads to a broader questioning of what else might be hidden from public view. They start investigating other non-canonical texts, exploring alternative theories about historical events, and becoming more skeptical of information provided by mainstream institutions. The Book of Enoch becomes a gateway to a worldview that assumes important truths are being deliberately concealed from ordinary people. Many people who participate in the challenge are surprised by how readable and engaging the Book of Enoch is. They had expected ancient religious texts to be boring, difficult, or irrelevant to modern life. Instead, they find stories that are dramatic, characters that are compelling, and themes that feel surprisingly contemporary. The book's combination of cosmic scope and human drama appeals to readers who enjoy both science fiction and spiritual literature. The book's emphasis on environmental themes also resonates with many contemporary readers. Enoch's descriptions of how the Watchers and Nephilim corrupted the earth, consumed natural resources irresponsibly, and disrupted the balance of creation speak to current concerns about climate change, environmental destruction, and the need for better stewardship of the planet. Some readers are particularly drawn to the book's portrayal of Enoch himself as someone who maintained a close, personal relationship with God, despite living in a world full of corruption and evil. They see Enoch as a model for how to live faithfully in difficult circumstances and how to seek truth and wisdom, even when popular culture is moving in the opposite direction. The book's detailed descriptions of heaven and the afterlife comfort some readers who have lost loved ones or who struggle with fear about death. Enoch's accounts of the different places where souls go after death and his assurances that justice will ultimately prevail provide hope for people who are dealing with grief, injustice, or uncertainty about the future. For many participants, the Book of Enoch challenge becomes a catalyst for deeper spiritual exploration. They start reading other ancient texts, exploring different religious traditions, and asking bigger questions about the meaning and purpose of life. The challenge introduces them to concepts and possibilities they had never considered before, and they find themselves on journeys of discovery that extend far beyond just reading one book. Some people discover that the Book of Enoch helps them make sense of personal experiences that they had previously found difficult to understand or explain. People who have had unusual spiritual experiences, prophetic dreams, or encounters with what they believe to be supernatural beings find in Enoch's accounts a framework for understanding their own experiences as part of a larger spiritual reality. The challenge also leads many people to become more interested in ancient languages, textual criticism, and the history of how religious texts have been preserved and transmitted over time. They want to read the Book of Enoch in its original languages and compare different translations to better understand what the text actually says versus how it has been interpreted by various translators and commentators. Perhaps most significantly, many people who participate in the Book of Enoch challenge report that it changes their perspective on the relationship between the seen and unseen worlds. The book's vivid descriptions of spiritual beings, heavenly realms, and the ongoing conflict between good and evil forces help readers develop a more nuanced understanding of how spiritual realities might influence everyday life on Earth. Chapter 11: Modern Connections and Ancient Mysteries. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Book of Enoch challenge is how participants keep finding connections between the ancient text and modern mysteries, current events, and contemporary concerns. These connections help explain why a book written thousands of years ago has captured the imagination of people living in the digital age. Many readers are struck by how the Book of Enoch's descriptions of advanced technology and scientific knowledge seem to anticipate discoveries and inventions that have only been developed in recent centuries. Enoch's accounts of traveling through space, observing the Earth from great heights, and understanding the mechanics of celestial bodies sound remarkably similar to the experiences of modern astronauts and astronomers. The book's detailed descriptions of metallurgy, weapon making, and other technologies that the Watchers taught to humans make some readers wonder whether ancient civilizations might have been more advanced than mainstream history acknowledges. Archaeological discoveries of sophisticated ancient artifacts, precise astronomical alignments in prehistoric monuments, and evidence of advanced engineering in structures like the pyramids seem to support the possibility that human knowledge has not always progressed in a simple linear fashion. Some participants in the challenge have become interested in reports of unusually large skeletal remains that have been discovered in various parts of the world, but haven't received much attention from mainstream archaeology. They see these discoveries as potential evidence that the Nephilim described in the Book of Enoch might have been real beings rather than mythological figures. The book's accounts of beings descending from the sky and teaching advanced knowledge to humans also resonate with people who are interested in theories about ancient alien contact. While the Book of Enoch identifies these beings as angels rather than extraterrestrials, some readers see similarities between Enoch's descriptions and modern accounts of UFO encounters and alien abduction experiences.